people are hyping this thing on the Gospel of Thomas. Is this the Apostle Thomas? Nobody says that, but why is that name on there?
I think that name is on there to try and give the book some credibility, to say that this goes back to one of the 12 in counter response to the existence of the Gospels that actually do have apostolic roots or have apostolic roots associated with someone very close to an apostle. So that's one thing that's going on. I think the other reason why you're getting this name is that it adds an air of credibility to make this kind of a connection, to make this kind of a suggestion. And in the case of Thomas, what we have that's interesting, because of all the works that we have that are outside the canon, Thomas is the most interesting, there's no doubt about it. About 50% of Thomas, you can actually look at your biblical Gospels and you can go, that looks recognizable to me. That's just a varied form of something I've seen in the Gospels. And then the other 50% is stuff you've never seen before.
That also tells you when it was written. Because
That's right.
If it's referring to stuff that's already in the Gospels came first, that came second.
Except that what happens with these scholars who have the new way is they'll sit there and say, no, the earliest form of this tradition is in Thomas. Now, in fact, it may be the case that Thomas is nothing. Thomas is not like a gospel that we're familiar with in our Gospels. Thomas is nothing but 114 independent sayings and or parables of Jesus. That's all it is.
Yeah,
just
no narrative about what happened in the events.
No
it's
outline,
just
no order of ministry, just 114 sayings. Here they come at you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you get to 114? And the other thing that's interesting about them is that they do mimic the Gospels, and they do reflect to have some touch with the same tradition that some of it does with what's in the Gospels. So some people will say, maybe there are a few sayings of Jesus in there that really, in fact, do go back to him. And that is conceivable. There is, out of the 114, there may be a half dozen that might actually reflect something Jesus said or something very close to what Jesus said. But the bulk of it doesn't. The bulk of it comes from the 2nd century, from the early 2nd century. It's on the edge of when Gnosticism is emerging, and that is a 2nd century movement in all likelihood, according to most of the experts. And so this material as a whole is late, but there are a few individual sayings that might be early. But anyone who suggests to you that that entire gospel goes back to that early period is not only running against the evidence in the text, it's running against the expertise of what Thomas scholars are saying about Thomas.
Also, people in the church knew about this book, didn't they?
They did.
And they rejected it.
Origen explicitly tells us in the early part of the 3rd century that this text was not read in the churches. It was not to be read in the churches, and it wasn't being read in the churches.